Welcome to the Holmlands Adventure Podcast. Storytelling inspired by adventure.
Welcome to the Holmlands Adventure Podcast. I'm your host, Cameron Hall. I'm thrilled to be joined today by professional skier and program coordinator for Protect Our Winters Canada, all the way from Revelstoke, Izzy Lynch.
Hi.
How are you doing, Izzy?
Good, thanks. How are you doing?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Very well. Thanks for coming on the show. Pleasure to have you on. So I just wanted to start with a bit of a retrospective on your professional skiing career, and I know that you grew up in Calgary. What were the earliest memories that you had of skiing?
Oh wow. The earliest memories I have of skiing are probably skiing at Fortress Mountain with my family. It's a small resort in Alberta that we spent every weekend at, and we started there when I was about 4. I started skiing when I was 2 at Lake Louise, but then we started at Fortress when I was 4, and we spent every single weekend there all through my childhood until my parents invested in a Backcountry lodge, and then we kind of started splitting our time between the resort and the backcountry, but those are my earliest memories.
And at what age did you start to get into the racing side of the sport?
I started racing around 8, I believe. And so that program was based at Fortress. And it was great because Fortress was kind of this like mom and pop show. It had really rustic lifts and this old lodge, and we would go stay in these dorm rooms every weekend with a bunch of other families. So every weekend was this really like communal event, and we would all meet up, have potluck dinners in the evenings. The kids would run around and play, and then we would all go out skiing during the day. Or my younger siblings would go in the daycare at the hill, and then my parents could go out skiing. And so, yeah. And then when I was a little bit older, like 8, I think, I started in the racing program there. And it was a great program because the mountain was so, they actually got quite a bit of snow for that area. So we ended up free skiing a lot, but also training gates and learning all the fundamentals and stuff like that.
And you mentioned the family lodge, Amiskwi, which was founded by your mum and dad on a bit of a whim, I gather.
Yeah. So my parents grew up in Eastern Canada and moved west when they kind of finished university because they were so drawn to the mountains, and they just had this real like thirst for adventure. And it wasn't until about 10 years after they moved that they were given this opportunity to go on their first backcountry skiing trip. And while they were on this trip with these friends in this little tiny A-frame in this area, just in BC in the Canadian Rockies, their friends mentioned to them that they were looking at investing in this area, and there was a tenure up for grabs, and they wanted to build a lodge there. And my parents were just like, oh my gosh, like that would be the coolest thing ever. And somehow they convinced the other couple that they would be good partners in starting a lodge.
So when you're growing up and you've got that experience of being out in the backcountry, but also racing in the gates, how did you balance the two different disciplines, and how did they help you on either side? Did the being out in the lodge influence your racing, and vice versa? Did the racing help to influence your sort of backcountry skiing style?
Yeah, I think I was so driven as a ski racer as a young kid. Like that's all I cared about. And I dreamt of going to the Olympics and doing that whole thing. And so that was very much my focus. But I also loved going to Amiskwi on our school breaks and on holidays and stuff. And I think the biggest influence it had on me was after I quit ski racing, I knew that there was this whole other aspect of skiing that I would continue to do for the rest of my life. Like skiing wasn't done because ski racing was done. Skiing to me was this lifelong sport that I would be involved with forever. And so, yeah, it just made me realize that it can be so fun on so many different levels.
And you come from a big family, 4 siblings. How much competition was there amongst you in terms of racing? Did your brothers and sisters race as well?
So my brother, I have a brother and two sisters. I'm the eldest. And my brother was actually a Nordic ski jumper. So he did Nordic combined, which is like cross-country skiing and ski jumping. And then my sister, who's just younger than him, ski raced. And then our youngest sister also ski jumped. So my brother and I were very competitive on pretty much every level, like who can jump the highest, who can run the fastest, who can win the most card games, but we didn't compete in ski racing.
And when you came to the point of finishing the racing career, was that a natural decision? Was it time to move on, or was it for other sort of lifestyle reasons that you what was the thought process of thinking, okay, well, I'm going to move on from the gates and I'm going to change my style and approach to skiing now?
Yeah, it was definitely a natural kind of progression. I had finished high school and I took a year after high school to continue racing. And at that point in my life, I was just kind of opening my eyes to all these other aspects of life. I had been so focused on racing until that point. And then I started to realize, oh, there's school and there's traveling and there's all these amazing experiences out there. And so, after that year after high school, I just decided, no, I want to go to university and try something different. And, but racing was still a big part of my life. I decided that I would coach racing while I was going to school. So every weekend I was still there setting courses, teaching kids. And I was still very connected with the community of ski racing. And then after a couple of years of that, I realized like, I'm pretty sick of just standing around on the side of a course and, like there's powder everywhere else in the mountain. We're slipping the powder off the course. What am I doing here? And so I approached a local free ride club to see if I could coach with them because I saw them ripping around. They just looked like they were having so much fun. And they needed another coach. And so they brought me on. And from there, I kind of made the full switch, like no more gates, just full free ride all the time. And that's what got me into the whole free skiing world.
And how did that transition go from you coaching and being involved within that club to then being a competitor within the Free Ride World Tour?
So I coached with the Free Ski Club in Lake Louise for a year or two, and we took the kids to all the different free ride competitions around Alberta and BC. And there was one happening at our local mountain at Lake Louise, and my kids were like, "You should compete." They convinced me that I should enter and compete, and I did, and had a great time. I think I crashed and like blew up, but it was so fun, and I just met this awesome community of people there, and I was like, oh man, I got a taste and I wanted more. And so things just kind of snowballed from there.
And at what point in your journey did that transition happen from competing on an international circuit to then becoming involved in the content side of things and being involved within films like Into the Mind? Did that help to put you into more of a spotlight to be recognized by those types of content creators and sponsors who were perhaps looking for athletes?
Yeah, so I never did like the full Free Ride World Tour, but I did a few of the events. I did in the States, and we had a stop in Revelstoke for a few years. So I finished university and I moved to Revelstoke, but I was still coaching back in Alberta. So I was driving every weekend, and I was competing a little bit in local comps and then doing a few of the bigger events, and that allowed me to connect with some brands and actually get some sponsorships. Which then just led to opportunities to go shooting with photographers and go film and stuff like that. It just slowly built, doors opened, and moving to Revelstoke at that time was really opportune because the resort had just expanded. And so there was a lot of media coming to cover the expansion of the resort, and there was a lot of buzz around the mountain. And so people would come to shoot or write stories or whatever. But there weren't a lot of established pro skiers there yet. So the mountain would ask us, who they knew we were out shredding every day, to go out with these people. And that opened a lot of doors as well.
And so when you're on a film shoot and you're content creating, how much pressure is there on you to perform and to get the shots that the director wants and needs? Because presumably you're working against the weather conditions, you're working against budget, you've got timescales involved. How much pressure do you feel as an athlete in that environment? Or is there no pressure? Is it just going with the flow and making the best of what the environment and the conditions bring on any given day?
There's a lot of pressure for sure. Like for everything to come together to get a shot, there's a lot of factors that need to align. And I think especially early on in my career, I put a lot of pressure on myself to be the best and always nail it. And I would get really frustrated with myself when I wouldn't, because I really felt like I had a lot to prove, and I was hungry. I was like so hungry to just show them that I deserve to be there. And so, yeah, it's hard. There's weather, there's avalanche conditions, there's your performance, how you're feeling physically, mentally. There's the camera person, like whether they're in the right position, they catch it properly. There's so many things. But as you build relationships with the people you're working with, you realize how much of a collaborative process it is. And it's not all on you. It's like you're a team out there, and you need to work together to make sure that everyone's safe and everyone's in a good mindset so that you can make it happen when everything does come together.
And how much of an appetite did being involved in that process give you for then getting more involved in creating your own content and developing your own stories?
Yeah, it opened my eyes to what an amazing creative experience it is to make films, and how intense it is. Like, Into the Mind was the first kind of bigger production that I worked on. And that was insane, like how many moving parts there were and people involved. And it was really cool to see. And then I think what really inspired me to make my own content was just feeling like I had a story to tell, but being really picky about how I wanted it told. And I just, the first film that my sister and I produced, Kindred, was a personal story about our family and growing up with a backcountry lodge. And we kind of knew like we were the only ones that could tell that story accurately. And so we decided to just take it upon ourselves to create it.
And was it always a case that with your first project that it was going to be about Amiskwi and the family journey and story and the lodge, or did you have a few other ideas that you were kind of banding around to play around with first?
No, that was very serendipitous as well. Like so I had pitched that idea to Arc'teryx a few times, wanting them to produce it over the years. And it just like never really fit with the program. And I don't think I really had a concrete idea of how it would all work. And then I got pregnant and I had a baby in the spring of 2017. And over that summer, I started thinking about skiing the next winter and what that was going to look like for me. And I really couldn't imagine leaving my new baby to go off filming for weeks at a time. And, but I really still I had this drive to be creative and like produce something. It was just like, I think I had a lot of time just to think about projects and stuff. And so I talked to my sister and I was like, I really want to do this. I feel like it's a way that I can like continue skiing, feed this creative drive that I have, and also do it with my family, like not have to leave Knox and go away. And so, yeah, it kind of ticked all those boxes and we were like, let's do it.
And how was it working with the family? Was it easy because you all know each other so well, or did it create some extra kind of stresses and tensions?
Yeah, my sister and I have worked on a lot of projects together. She's an amazing photographer. And we collaborate really well together. Like we definitely have our moments. But the great thing about being sisters is you can fight and then it's over and everything is back to normal. But we just like we just have this really good understanding of each other. Like we don't even have to finish sentences. We just know what each other's talking about. We have a very shared vision for kind of creativity and like what we want to produce. So that was awesome because we were just on the same page from the very beginning. But yeah, family, like we were all up at the cabin for a week filming together, and my dad was there and my brother was there, and like neither of them have really filmed that much. So there was a learning curve and understanding that you need to have a lot of patience when you're filming and stuff like that. But overall it was an amazing experience.
And how different was the behind the scenes experience to what you're leading it now compared to when you had been directed and produced by other people? Was there a lot of similarities that you kind of and things that you took over from that side of working with production companies, or was this completely different feeling and experience to be able to take it on yourself?
Oh man, it was so different. It was so involved. There are so many layers, so many things to think about. We were a small crew. We were working with a pretty tight budget. And so, we took it all on ourselves. We were cooking for the crew. We were coordinating all the logistics. We were coming up with the creative plan. We were directing. Learning how to direct was a big learning curve for us. Zoya and I know what we want, but how do we convey that to a team that we're working with? Massive learning. And then going into like the editing process. And so my sister had never edited a film. She had done a few little ski edits, over the years, but this was a big, huge undertaking for us. And then we knew nothing about post-production. So we just we really learned as we went. And luckily we have awesome connections to really, really, really talented people that have made films. And we were calling them up every day, just being like, what do we do? What do we do? And it took a lot of kind of just like swallowing our pride and being like, okay, we have no idea what we're doing, but we know we can produce something that's worth watching. So we just had to let it go and be like, hey guys, like, can you tell us how to do this thing? And we felt really dumb sometimes, the questions that we had to ask, but that's how you learn.
And becoming a mum during this time as well, and being part of the project, your own mother was obviously part of the film too, being a family story and a family journey. How did motherhood change your own perspective on the relationship with your mum? And did you perhaps have any anecdotes or different sense of appreciation for when you were filming Kindred that your mum perhaps relayed onto you that you weren't necessarily aware of when you were growing up?
Yeah. Oh, I think anyone can attest to this, but just having a kid made me realize how amazing my mom is on a whole other level. And she had 4 and I have 1. And I'm just like especially, the cool thing about Kindred was, we went into that film wanting to kind of share how much of a show our parents were when we first got into Amiskwi. Like, they had so little knowledge of backcountry, of avalanches, of building, of any of this. Yet they had the balls to pack up 4 kids under the age of 9 and snowmobile us in there and just like take us ski touring, and live in the wilderness for weeks at a time. And but then I got that. But then when I had my own child, I really got it. I was like, this is next level. And it's hard. It's hard to get them out and get packed and get out the door and not feel, I think the biggest thing I realized was like how amazingly selfless my mom is. Like, she was just always so happy to get us all out in the mountains. And it never seemed like she was upset that she wasn't skiing for herself or, having time alone out there. She was just like all about the family and giving us amazing adventure opportunities.
And there's a really beautiful quote from your mum, which is part of the featurette that complements the film. There are pieces of me walking in the freedom of all that I have longed for. Talking about you and your sisters. How does it make you feel? How does it make you feel when you hear your mum say something like that and kind of document it as part of the project?
Yeah, it's cool. That piece was really awesome to work on. It was like a challenge because it was very intimate messaging that we wanted her to share, and we had to work on it together quite a bit. And it just made me realize that like my parents sacrificed a lot and took on a lot of risk and made massive changes in their life to give themselves and give us a life in the mountains. And I think like they got there, but then now they're watching their kids take it even further. And so it's neat to hear her say that. And I feel like she does see what we're doing and feel like if she could go back in time, that's the life she would have wanted for herself, just being so immersed in the mountains and building a career in the mountains. And the cool thing is as my mom's retired, my parents worked in the city my entire life and they had like careers and they had kind of like a double life. Like my dad was like a downtown Calgary worker, accountant, and, you know, pounded pavement every day to work. And then any free time we had, we were out in the mountains. And then we all left the city and moved and lived fully immersed in the mountains. And my mom was able to kind of semi-retire a few years ago, and she moved to Revelstoke, and now it's like her ski bumming dreams are finally coming true. And so it's nice to see that.
And how much of an open dialogue do you have as a family? And in terms of, you know, how open were you all within the process of what was going to be discussed in the film? And is that something that comes naturally, or did you have to maybe dig a little bit deeper into some of your own relationships to say, okay, guys, if we're going to go into our own story, we're going to have to, you know, be really honest with each other and maybe share some things that, you know, perhaps were or maybe weren't discussed kind of openly as a family prior to getting the cameras rolling?
Yeah, I think we're a pretty open family, and really my siblings and I are really close. And we talk a lot. We are really connected. We talk about everything. And so that was kind of, I mean, it was discussed. We talked about it. We had some reservations about kind of like diving deep into my parents' stories, because I mean, like any family, there's like hard times and issues that we've had to work through together. And a lot of personal, you know, we were like, we're revealing a very personal story to the world. And so, yeah, we were a bit concerned about like drawing the story out of my mom and dad. So we had to coach them a bit. We had really good people with us that helped draw out the story, that were like outside of the story and ask good questions. And the cool thing was Amiskwi, when we're up there, it's like everyone's happy place. And we all just feel so safe there. And it just like gives you this opportunity to open up and feel comfortable. And it was really amazing. My dad was so happy throughout this whole filming process. I think anytime all his kids are up there and he's just getting to share time with us in the mountains, he is overjoyed. And it was so amazing to see how like vulnerable he allowed himself to be in the interview process and just tell the story. And it was really meaningful for him to be able to, and I think he realized that like as we were making it and as we were talking about things, how meaningful of an experience just the whole process of building the lodge and raising his kids there was. It was pretty cool.
And how much of that process did you take away in thinking, well, is there going to be a sequel? Is there going to be more that you can do with the family story and with the lodge? Or is it time for next project is going to be something completely different? Oh
man, we finished that project and we were like, we're never doing that again. It was so hard. It took a lot out of us. The editing process was like pretty brutal. Zoya and I so her office is in her attic, and we spent the summer after filming editing. It was, you know, like 35 degrees in there, and we were up late. I had a 1-year-old, so I was putting him to bed and then going over to Zoya's house and like staying up till 2 a.m. editing, and just thinking we were, you know, when you make something creative, a piece of art or whatever it is, you hate it. You like crumple it up and throw it in the garbage 10 times and then redo it. So once it was done, we were like, okay, that was the worst. We're done. Great learning experience. But it's funny how like the pain of the experience fades over time and you slowly just start remembering the good things. And here we are working on another project somehow.
And how's that project coming along? I believe filming started this last winter.
Yeah, it did. So we started, thank goodness, we started at the end of February. And we had 2 weeks blocked off to film everything. Because if we had waited any longer, we would have not gotten any footage because of the current state of the world right now. But yeah, so I guess in a way, this story we're working on is an extension of the family story. I think I just really like human stories, and family is such a big theme in my life. And so this one is touching on motherhood, and getting kids out into the outdoors. So it is definitely an extension of Kindred for sure. But yes, so we started filming in February. Unfortunately, we're filming with another family and all the kids got sick in the filming process. my son got pneumonia. Everyone got super sick. So it was a bit of a disaster, but we got a lot of footage and we made it work. And then we planned on getting more, but the ski hills shut down. So we're just going to work with what we have.
And sort of talking about the next generation and coming on to what your main role now is working as a program coordinator for Protect Our Winters Canada. And how did that role come about? Because I know that you had experience in your degree with communications and culture, and you worked in marketing for some other bodies. But how did the whole organisation of Powe Canada develop, and how did you get involved into doing the position that you're in today?
Yeah, good question. So Protect Our Winters was founded by Jeremy Jones, professional snowboarder in the States, in 2007. But just in 2018, there was a group of Canadians that wanted to start up our own chapter up here. And so they came together and started a not-for-profit and a charity, and put together a board of directors, and kind of started working towards creating a movement in Canada and the goal of it is to unite the outdoor community to take action against climate change. And some athletes I know really well were involved, Greg Hill being one of them, and Mike Douglas. And they kind of built it up to the point where they needed to hire some staff. They did like a job. They put out a posting for a job, but then actually a couple of the people involved reached out to me, and they were like, would you be interested in being involved with this? And I really wanted to be interested or involved with Powe, but I had a job at the time, and I was just like, I don't know if I need to leave what I'm doing. And but then I started talking to them a little bit more about it, and I was like, oh yeah, this is the most amazing opportunity. I'm there. I'm in.
And over the course of your career, how's your own relationship with the environment changed? Is it always been something that you've been passionate about and you have a consciousness of? I imagine, especially spending so much time out in nature through the family lodge. But has it played a key role in your kind of decision making of where you've been and what you've done? And is it something that you brought into your daily practices, or is it maybe a bit more of an awakening now, as the whole world seems to be coming a little bit more around to the fact that we do have this huge, climate change issue that's just suddenly been dawning on a lot of individuals?
Yeah, I mean, I've always really cared about the environment. I love nature. It's like I have immersed myself in nature as much as I can over the course of my lifetime, and have traveled around the world to see natural environments in different parts of the planet. I've recycled, composted, done the basics, like cared. But like everyone, I think there's just this awakening right now to like, wow, we have this insane effect on our planet and our environment and our health and our economy and all of this stuff. And climate change is going to be disastrous for us. And it's been a slow awakening for sure. But the past few years, I've really, like, once you're awake to it, it's like you can't turn it off. And so I'd say probably in the past like 3 or 4 years, I've started to really realize that the impact, and it's shifted my behavior for sure. I used to work for a heli skiing company, travel a ton all winter, fly all over the world, have a snowmobile, all of these things. And I'm like shifting away from that. I don't have a sled anymore. I don't go heli skiing. And I try to, I still have to use helicopters for my work sometimes. But I try to limit it as much as possible. And travel for sure is something that I'm just so much more aware of. Like, I'm way more hesitant to jump on a flight than I ever have been. So yeah, it's changed my behavior a lot.
And how has being a mum had an influence as well? Do you think more about the next generation? Do you think about how Knox's life is going to be impacted by this awakening and this consciousness of climate change, and try and adapt accordingly, almost to set a good example for him?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think having children makes you really nostalgic for your own childhood, and I was so lucky to grow up in this amazing family that like brought us into nature so much and have all these experiences of like, pristine natural environments and backcountry where no one's around, and go skiing and see glaciers and stuff like that. And I want Knox to have those opportunities too. And so having him, it's made me think so much more about the future and what that's going to look like for him. And it definitely has really made it a more important thing to me.
So there's lots of Protect Our Winters factions around the world. What specifically are the aims and objectives for Powe Canada that you're working on in the short term, medium and long term?
So for Powe Canada, our main goals right now are, so like I said, we're uniting the outdoor community to take action against climate change. So we're kind of doing that in 3 different ways. The first one is education. So we have a education program that we take into high schools all over the country, and we take elite athletes to the schools to present this hour-long presentation on climate science and solutions. So it's like what the problem is, what's going on, and how we can make change on a large scale and small scale in those ways. And so that's one big one. We presented to 12,000 students last year, and our goal this year was to do the same. The second one is advocacy. So we're working to kind of connect with business leaders, brands, influential people, politicians to come together to influence policy change in our country. So we're actually like planning on doing kind of like lobbying trips to Ottawa and try and really push through positive climate policy and get rid of ones that aren't very positive for the climate. And then inspiration. So we have this amazing team of ambassadors, and we work with them to, they have a huge influence over tons of different people, and we work with them to just inspire people to take action in their daily lives. So through those 3 pillars, we have like little short-term kind of campaign goals. And then the biggest thing we're working on right now is building membership. So we've part of the advocacy and kind of inspiration pillars, we have built these regional chapters across Canada, and they're volunteer led, and they're working to just get us more exposure in communities and help us build membership, because we think, well, we know the more members, there's power in numbers, and the more members we have behind this cause, the more power we'll have when we take it to the government and say, hey, like Canadians care about this. We need to see change.
And on a more of a local level, when you're working in Revelstoke and the faction there, Revelstoke's a town that during wintertime, its population virtually doubles with the amount of people coming in to enjoy the mountains. And a lot of those people that travel are from overseas. How does the work of Powe Canada help to empower and engage that traveling audience and that foreign market that, are jumping on planes and are hiring cars and burning fossil fuels to be able to come and enjoy the mountains, and thinking about the heli-ski community in the area as well, which is obviously very rich in terms of its abundance and also in terms of its clientele. How do you work with those different factions of outsiders, so to speak, to help to have a positive impact and an influence on their habits and behaviors?
That's a work in progress. So the chapters were started last October, so they're not even a year old yet. But we have connected with this really amazing group of people in Revelstoke, and kind of as a side project, we're working on developing some sort of offsetting program. We're working with the tourism board in Revelstoke and the city and a bunch of different individuals to come up with a way that people who are traveling to Revelstoke to enjoy our skiing are also able to give back. So we'll calculate kind of like what their carbon footprint was for their trip, and then offer them opportunities to offset, but offset locally. And what we want to do is set up an offsetting project that is highly visible, highly just a local thing that a ton of locals can be involved with, that people can see and they can say, wow, this is an amazing project. It's reducing emissions in our area by this much, very tangible result. And I contributed to it, and I'm proud of that. And it's just allowing us to, we want our ski industry here to be sustainable. We want it to continue, but we realized that in order to do that, we need to make some big changes and really put forth a strong effort to make sure that we're reducing the impact. So that's one thing we're working on locally.
So if people who are listening to this want to get involved and want to support your endeavours and initiatives, how can they go about that? I guess both in that national and kind of local level, and also to people who are listening, perhaps from outside of the borders of Canada.
Yeah. Well, if you want to get involved and support Powe, you can go to our website. It's protectourwinters.ca. And then if you love Revelstoke and you come skiing here and you travel from around the world to come skiing here and you'd like to know more about the local project that I just mentioned, it's called Keep Revelstoke Cool. It's in very, very early stages of development, but you can just email me, Izzy at protectourwinters.ca, and I'll let you know kind of where we're at and what's going on there.
And with so many athletes involved and ambassadors, as you mentioned, and you obviously all have a lot of experience within the content creation side and filmmaking side. Are there any plans for from perhaps some film projects like we've seen through the likes of sort of Picture Organic Clothing do in helping to raise awareness and funds of Powe as an organisation?
Yeah, that's definitely on the radar. Nothing concrete yet, but Greg Hill produced an amazing film last year called Electric Greg. And he is a really amazing example of an athlete that's just like totally shifted his behavior and perspective as he's become more awakened to this climate issue that we're facing. And he was him and Switchback Productions, who produced it, they were super generous in giving us the opportunity to use it to raise funds for Powe and raise awareness. And it's a really inspiring film. I love it. You can watch it online now. And then we have a few other athletes athletes are pitching ideas and they're using their voice to try and spread the word and also raise funds for us. So there will be projects coming out.
And if people wanted to find out a little bit more about yourself, Izzy, keep up to date with your own projects and the Motherhood film as it progresses and develops, where can people find you and connect?
Probably Instagram is the best way. I'm at Izzy__Lynch. I haven't been posting much lately because we've been locked down, but that's the best way.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for having the time to speak and to chat and sharing your journey. Really good to speak with you. And best of luck with all your endeavours with Powe and the personal projects too.
Thanks, Cameron. Thanks for the opportunity.